Hello, my name's Wayne Ergel, and welcome to this video. I want you to meet someone. It's Frank, our fitness enthusiast. You've probably met him before because he gets used in customer personas all the time. Let's look at him for this case. He's 25 to 45 years old, which you can't even be. Income 40K to 80K. Goals: get in shape, build muscle, lose weight. Interests: working out, healthy eating, sports. Pain points: lack of time, gym intimidation, probably motivation as well. So that's a typical traditional profile. You've got a demographic, you've got an age range, and some sort of qualifying characteristics. But here's the problem. What content would you create for Frank that he would actually appreciate and identify with? Because there's a problem with Frank. Actually, it's not poor old Frank, it's us. Frank at 25 is single, he lives in an apartment and wants to look good, and has a limited budget. I notice I missed the D there. Frank at 35 is married, he has kids, he has a house with a garage, but he's returning to fitness after quite a long break. He's wanting to improve his health. And then Frank at 45, his kids are older, they're possibly moving out, but he's battling dad bod in a big way. His doctor has recommended that he gets back on an exercise program, and he's dealing with all kinds of aches and pains. The motto of this story: all Franks are different. So how do you have one persona for multiple Franks? Well, you don't. It doesn't make sense. Instead, let's look at what's now possible, and what in particular is possible with deep audience intelligence. So instead of demographics and age groups that don't make sense and salary ranges, we discover psychology that actually drives their decisions, what triggers their needs for solutions, what content they crave versus what they ignore. And most likely they're ignoring a lot of content that isn't aimed specifically at them, because a 25-year-old doesn't care about content created for 45-year-olds and vice versa. And then how do they really make purchasing choices? And the result of that is content that actually connects with the audience type. So how do we do that? That's why we built Echo, and I want to introduce it here. There's another video that goes into more detail. I'll link that, but if you haven't seen it, it's an end-to-end content system for AI search. It has AI-powered DNA analysis, so we're looking at brand, audience, and competitive DNA. We get a deep audience understanding. Then we can create content at scale. This is content created at scale specific to that brand, and it's intended to drive traffic to the most important pages on the website. And then it's optimized for AI discovery. We know search is changing. We know that ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, and Google with their AI overviews have changed search, and we have to change with it. So that's what Echo does for us. Let's take a look at what an audience DNA report looks like. This is my nocoDB. We use this as the backend for Echo. It has several tables. We have a brands table, we have a brands DNA, we have a brand audience DNA, competitor DNA, so those are where the DNA reports and fields are going to be put. But in particular, let's look at Rogue Fitness. I'm close to them. I like them as a company. I buy their stuff. I use that at the gym, so I feel like I have a connection to them. Here's one audience intelligent report that was created in our workflow for the returning veterans. This is someone who has been away from fitness for a while. They were once a committed athlete, navigating the complex emotional terrain of athletic re-entry. So they were good, and they've probably gone away from fitness for a while, not unlike our persona Frank, and now they want to come back. So what's driving them? What are the core psychological drivers and motivations? What is their momentum psychology? What behavior patterns, and we'll see where these come from in the workflow here shortly. What behavior patterns drive their decision making? How are they finding information? So where do they get their information? Who do they trust? How do they find content that they can resonate with, that they believe, so that they can make a purchase? What are their pain points and frustrations and anxiety triggers? Again, a 25-year-old Frank and a 35 and a 45-year-old Frank, these are different. So now we're looking not at an age demographic, but at an audience type that is returning to fitness. And it could be one that was only away for a little while, or maybe they were away for 10 years, who knows. But this content would work for both. And then what are the hidden insights that traditional research misses? So we're looking at vulnerability and authority paradox. So while appearing confident and knowledgeable, returning veterans operate from a place of hidden vulnerability. They simultaneously position themselves as experienced athletes while privately questioning their current capabilities. So they're torn. They want to position themselves as experienced and knows what they're doing, but they quietly and inside are concerned that they don't have those capabilities. So the type of content you create for that person is totally different than get fit in your home gym kind of equipment. So this is an example of the audience DNA report. I'm going to quickly say, and then I'll talk more about it later at the end of the video, this workflow is available in our community. It's called What AI. Anyone who joins the community gets the Echo workflow as part of their membership, and we'd love to see you in there and joining. So that is a quick view of an audience DNA report. I want to look a little further into this fitness case study. This was again Rogue Fitness. I also want to make it very clear, none of these brands are participating in this. None of them even know that I've run a DNA analysis on them. I'm just trying to give you an example. So let's look at the three different psychological realities that the audience DNA discovered. So these are the three audience types. We have the emergent athlete, the committed competitor, and the returning veteran, which we just looked at. Each one has different psychological drivers, content needs, and purchasing behaviors. So if we take a deeper dive into the emerging athlete, what is their thing? What's driving them? They have identity validation through competence, so they're proving transformation capability to themselves. They need to prove to themselves. They need to be able to show themselves that they're sort of worthy of moving forward in this transformation. They also are visualizing themselves in the future. So they're making a decision on buying equipment based on what they want to become, not necessarily on what they are today. And that leads to a question for them. Do you buy the cheapest version of the Rogue bench press, squat rack, whatever it might be, or do you go middle of the road, or you go high end? Rogue has different equipment for different needs. When you're visualizing who you're going to become, maybe you're going at least middle of the road, and that's important to know, and you can create content for people on why that's a good investment. And then the professional aspiration paradox. They want serious equipment, but there's a paradox because they're at a beginner status or early in their fitness journey. So how much do you spend? It's a real question, and I've faced it before with other things. I'm like, do I want to spend this or I want to spend that? And with this information, a brand is able to create content that would help someone make that decision. So that's a deeper dive into the emerging athlete. And this leads us to where we can go with content. I do know is that the traditional content for Frank, best home gym for equipment for beginners and getting started and budget friendly and all that, isn't doing it. There's too much competition out there these days. AI search is writing basically articles anyway for us. So we need to look at creating content specific to an audience type. So instead of home gym equipment for beginners, we're looking at professional equipment for your transformation journey. That resonates with our emerging athlete. Why quality matters more than experience level, which leads to building the home gym of your future self. Where does this person fit in that? Are they going premium, highest dollar value, or are they backing off a bit? It's all about where they see themselves. And then beginner to serious equipment. This could be an opportunity for content that says, here's why you should buy this equipment that's a little bit above the beginner level. And that way you're writing and you're speaking directly to them, and also making a fan. Think about someone who comes to your business and buys stuff because you've spoken directly to them. And that's what this audience DNA report and content allows us to do. So I want to talk a little bit about the workflow. Got this block level diagram here. We start off with a settings node. All our workflows start with a settings node. It is settings for that workflow. So we're setting them generally up front, and they are used throughout. Then we're using the brand DNA report. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link to it, but we have a brand DNA component of Echo as well, which creates a very, very comprehensive and interesting report on the brand itself. So we're pulling that in to use as we write our audience DNA reports. So next part of the workflow, create audience types. We saw there were 3 audience types for my fitness example. This is where those are created. Then we're looking, and we saw these in the reports, at their behavior patterns. You know, what are their patterns when they make decisions, and how do they buy? And then what are their decision-making criteria? And then what are their pain points? We all hear those words. Well, what are they? And with this, we're able to find the pain points of each of the audience types. And then what are their information sources? Where do they get their information? So those are the components of sort of the research part of the audience DNA. And then you get to the creation of it. You have the profile generation, which is generating fields, and I can show you those in a moment. And then actually writing the report. So let me quickly show you what I'm talking about when I say these fields. This is my audience DNA table, and you can see we have the report field, the type, the type description, primary motivation, key pain points, emotional triggers, information sources, decision pattern, content preferences, trust signals, and anxiety points. So those are all the points that we develop to create our brand report, which I had showed you already. And that happens here in the next step. Okay, so I'm going to jump here. So this is a quick screenshot of the workflow, but I'm going to go into n8n and show you that. I'll run it and talk through it as it's running. This is the Echo workflow. It's going to be a combination of all the workflows in a bigger one. They're not tied together. They're just there, and they're triggered by different webhooks. This is the easiest way to develop it. We may break these up later into individual components, but for now they're all together. So here is the audience DNA, and I'll show you how you would run it. You will be back in nocoDB. You go to brands. I've already run it for Gibson, but I'm going to run it again. You'll see these brands. They're mostly my interests, things I'm testing with, but I pick brands that I know something about to see how accurate and how good the reports would be. So Gibson is a guitar manufacturer, if you don't know, and I play guitar, so I'm going to pick them. So let's get this running. We're going to execute the webhook, the workflow from the webhook. Click that. That's now waiting on me to trigger it. I'm going to trigger it by doing a little checkbox here, and hopefully, yep, thank you. That is running our workflow. So as I mentioned, and I'll blow this up, we have our settings node. So these are all the settings that are used throughout the workflow. You'll be able to see these if you join the community and get the workflow. You'll also get the benefit of another workflow we're building to set this up for you, so you won't have to enter all this stuff. But these are all field IDs from nocoDB. So instead of using the naming throughout, we set the field IDs and then we use them throughout the video or throughout the workflow, so that we don't have to worry about changing the names. So there's that. We set the brand. We get the brand DNA report. So this is a standard nocoDB node in n8n where we go and get the brand report. We set it. Now we're creating the audience type. So as I mentioned, we're creating 3. This is for Gibson guitar. So we've got the aspiring music explorer, the evolving artist, and the cultural steward returner. Interesting. So those are our 3 audience types that were created. I split them out so that they're given to this section, which is going and getting research for the different audience types. So each node will take in the 3 audience types, do a search via perplexity for that audience type, and then return information for them. So our behavior patterns agent, I always do a system and user prompt. I feel like I get more consistent results that way. You'd be able to see all the prompts in the community workflow version. But here you can see this is the behavior patterns agent. So now he's writing about the behavioral patterns and their approach to music and brand interaction. I won't read through it all, but it's giving you some psychological basis for why people are behaving the way they are, depending on the type. Okay, and then we have the decision-making agent. So, you know, what is it that the aspiring music explorer is looking at when they make their decision? Life milestones such as beginning music lessons or joining a group spark interest. So there's stuff about what that audience type is using to make a decision. I see I need to fix that. Pain points, same kind of thing. What are the pain points that those audience types experience? So we can take a look at that. Aspiring music explorer faces multiple pain points and frustration with engaging with brands and purchasing musical products, frustration with brands, lack of accessible beginner-friendly guidance. Yep, there you go. Absence of supportive community or membership. This audience seeks encouragement and a sense of belonging. So, you know, if you're Gibson, couldn't you take that? Now, you could decide to do it or not, and develop a community that was supportive of beginning artists or beginning musicians, and maybe create an app, maybe create some better buying guidelines. I don't know if you guys know, Gibson guitars are expensive. I'm not saying they're not worth it compared to the rest of the market, but they're expensive. And, you know, if you're a beginner, do you need to pay $2,000 for a guitar? Probably not. Now, Gibson has a lower end, not probably beginner guitars, but maybe they look at it and go, yeah, we need a better entry level guitar. So that's the kind of information that they can get from these reports. Okay, so we're moving along. We're at the information sources. So this is, you know, what, where do these guys, an aspiring music explorer, get their information? Let's say music learner beginning musical journey relies heavily on a combination of structured educational materials, teacher guidance, and community support to research and validate their decisions. And there it is again, community support. So many things need community support, and you know, I think it's probably more than we've created a Discord channel and you guys can go complain about stuff or write about stuff in it. You know, it's the brand taking charge, or at least driving the direction of the community support. I mean, wouldn't that be better? Well, sorry, that's off of my own opinion about community support and what brands can do, but you get the gist. These are the areas where we find out how our audience types get their information. All right, so then we're getting close to the end of the workflow, and this is where we loop through it because there are three full sets of information. There's the audience name, audience description, behavior patterns, decision making, and pain points, information sources for each type. So you've got information sources again, pain points, decision making, behavior patterns for each audience type, and that all came from this section back here. Okay, so it loops through and writes the profile for each one. The profile are those fields that I showed you, so it's going and creating the fields, then it's creating a record in the DNA table, and then finally this final agent is writing the report itself. So this is the one that takes the input in and writes that final report that we saw. Okay, so it finished up, wrote our three reports. We can go check that real quick. Go to our audience DNA, Gibson, the aspiring music explorer, the evolving artist, and the cultural steward returner. That's hard for me to say. And for each one, you get an audience DNA report, which again has executive summary, drivers and motivations. You're seeing now the decision making and the stuff that was in the workflow. Where do they find their content? What are their pain points? And hidden insights. So, and this one's a really good thing to take a look at. What does traditional research miss? And And this, I think, is really huge in developing content later. So that's what our audience DNA report looks like. I'm going to jump back here into my slides. And I just want to say again, you know, for me, I think the business impact is huge. I think that so long we've done a lot of generic stuff, you know, best this, best that, but it didn't really speak to anyone. You know, we said we're doing things for search engine, but were we really? And maybe you were, I'm not saying you weren't. But as a group and a collective I think we could probably do better, and we now have a way to do that, and that's what we've created with Echo. So instead of traditional, you know, generic stuff, we're doing content that speaks directly to them, and that it converts because it connects with their actual motivations, and that's really the intention of the audience DNA part of the ecosystem. So I'm going to wrap this up and just say here's how you get the workflow, and it's very simple. Join the whatai.co community. It's a community that Alex Kim and I have created, and you probably don't know this, but Alex is an n8n ambassador. n8n does not give that designation to everyone, so they know he knows his stuff and he represents the brand in the way they'd like him to do it. It's a great resource, so that's one reason to join the community. But again, the other thing is you get the complete ecosystem, which includes the brand DNA, audience and competitive DNA, AI optimized content creation, and platform and publishing. So that's what you get when you join the community. You get Echo, and as I mentioned, you get access to Alex and me. You get other workflows that him and I are doing, and the community's doing. We had a great experience recently where I created a workflow that used Airtable for backend. Community members wanted nocoDB, and one of our community members did it, and it was great. So thank you to them. So it's a collaborative community that's really here to support each of us in our efforts to learn how to use n8n automations in general to create valuable stuff. So thank you so much for watching. I sincerely appreciate it. I hope if you found some value that you will subscribe, like, and comment, and I hope again to see you in our community, and I hope to see you in the next video.